Okay, so we all know A Christmas Carol, right? It's pretty much the holiday classic. You know, that heartwarming story about redemption and the Christmas spirit. But what if I told you that the story we think we know is really only half the picture? That it wasn't born from holiday cheer at all, but from a place of pure anger and desperation. So when Charles Dickens's book first came out, yeah, most critics absolutely loved it. But not everybody. Check this out. One reviewer for London's Morning Post newspaper called it a strange jumble that was displeasing and absurd. I mean, talk about bah humbug. So, how on earth does the world's most beloved Christmas story end up with a review like that? Well, to figure it out, we have to look past the pages of the book and into the pretty desperate, angry, and honestly radical world that created it in the first place. To really get this story, you first have to understand the world that could create a character like Ebenezer Scrooge. And let me tell you, this was not the cozy, festive Victorian England you see on Christmas cards. Not even close. You had this era of just stark contrasts. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, pulling families out of the countryside and cramming them into these grim, overcrowded cities. And because of that, a lot of the old community traditions were just fading away. You know, far from being this major celebration, Christmas was actually losing its importance. For a lot of people, it was just another workday. The reality of the 1840s was just bleak. Cities were filthy, poverty was everywhere. Debtors' prisons, a terrifyingly common thing. In fact, Dickens knew that firsthand. His own father was sent to one. And then, just a year before he wrote the Carol, this shocking government report came out, exposing just horrific conditions for kids working in mines and factories. It was a brutal time. And that brings us to Dickens himself. Writing A Christmas Carol, well, it wasn't just some creative project for him. No, this was a desperate move, and it was driven by both total fury and a whole lot of fear. Dickens was caught in a perfect storm. On one hand, his latest novel was tanking. He was deep in debt, and his wife was expecting their fifth kid. At the exact same time, he was morally outraged by that child labor report. He felt like he had to do something. So when his publisher actually rejected the idea for this Christmas story, he decided to pay for the printing himself, which was a huge financial risk that seriously could have ended his career right then and there. So fueled by all this desperation, he wrote the entire book in this white-hot, feverish burst. He'd spend his days writing, and then at night he would just walk for hours, like 15 to 20 miles through the darkest streets of London, just soaking it all in and channeling all that anger onto the page. I mean, think about that for a second. From the first little spark of an idea to a finished book sitting on the shelves, the whole thing took just 6 weeks. It was this incredible creative sprint, and it was all driven by this powerful sense of urgency. So yeah, this was no gentle holiday fairy tale. Dickens fully intended for his book to be a political weapon. He wanted to write a story that would, and this is in his own words, strike a sledgehammer blow for the poor. And to really get the punch he was throwing, you need to know about this guy, Thomas Malthus. He was a hugely influential economist, and his basic theory was that poverty was just a law of nature. You know, there would never be enough food to go around, so the poor were simply a surplus population that society couldn't possibly support. It was a cold argument, but it was a really common way to justify doing nothing to help. Does that sound familiar? When Scrooge says this absolutely chilling line, Dickens is putting the most famous economic theory of his day right into his villain's mouth. This wasn't just some throwaway comment. It was a direct, blistering attack on a mainstream political idea. And when Scrooge dismisses the poor by asking, "Are there no prisons and the union workhouses?" he's just echoing another common belief. The official policy at the time was to shove people into these brutal institutions where the conditions were made harsh on purpose. Scrooge's cruelty wasn't fiction. It was literally the status quo. Dickens makes his argument visual with these two just horrifying figures. They represent the direct consequences of society looking the other way. And the ghost warns Scrooge to beware the boy ignorance, most of all. He says, "On his brow I see that written, which is doom." It's this stark warning. Society's ignorance will be its own downfall. So, the big question, did the sledgehammer actually work? Oh yeah, absolutely. The book's impact was more immediate and more profound than even Dickens could have ever imagined. The book was an instant sensation. The first print run of 6,000 copies sold out completely by Christmas Eve. It just tapped into this deep public hunger for a more meaningful, more compassionate holiday. Dickens's huge gamble had paid off, big time. And it wasn't just a bestseller, it fundamentally reshaped the holiday itself. The book helped revive the whole celebration of Christmas, embedding these ideas like charitable giving, the big family feast with a turkey, and a spirit of goodwill right into the fabric of the modern holiday. It even helped popularize the greeting, Merry Christmas. And here's the amazing part. That sledgehammer blow actually landed. The emotional power of the story is credited with helping to shift public opinion, which contributed to the passage of the 1844 Factories Act. This law limited working hours for children and improved their safety conditions. It's an incredible example of art directly influencing law. Okay, so let's circle all the way back to that original, scathing review. What did that critic miss? Or, and here's the thought, did they actually get something right? When that reviewer called the book an incomprehensible jumble of comedy, tragedy, a sermon, and a political essay, you know what? They weren't entirely wrong. But they saw that as a weakness when actually it's the secret to the book's power. A Christmas Carol works precisely because it's all of these things at once. It's a spooky ghost story that gets you in the door, right? But it's also a radical political argument wrapped in a comedy, which is itself inside a tale of personal redemption. This messy, powerful, wild mix is exactly what makes it so unforgettable. So, the cozy holiday classic that we all love was actually born from anger, desperation, and a burning desire for social justice. It's such a powerful reminder that sometimes a simple story can force us all to see the world in a totally different way. Which, of course, leaves us with one final question. What sledgehammer blow do you think Dickens would write about today?